Welcome everybody to this webinar of the VITCAST product, the goal of which is the development of innovative solutions for the solution of fungal diseases. This is a product we have been working on since 2009, and we will show you the results and the outcomes. My name is Lucía Lloret from FEUGA, and we are partners in charge of the coordination and the management of the project together with Monet, which is the company representative of the project. And we are in charge of dissemination of results and the transference of the VITCAST solutions in order to implement these solutions through or by the final user. I'm going to speak very briefly of who we are and what we do, and I will explain in general lines. I will give you a general vision of the project, and the rest of the speakers are going to see the different parts of the innovation. Well, we are located in Galicia with the headquarters in Santiago and Vigo, and the permanent headquarters in Brussels, well, an office in Brussels. And we have been working for over 30 years acting as a transfer office. We develop collaboration actions among universities, the entrepreneurial sector, the industry, society, and the public administration, mainly from the different departments of national projects. We devote ourselves to the promotion and management of R+D+I projects, as well as result exploitation. In this slide, you can see the previous experience that we have in FEUGA, in European projects such as Interreg, etc., the framework, the Horizon 2020 framework program, as well as national projects. We have 10 operational groups, including VITCAST, 14 now, since we have been approved for more projects, and we have different roles because we render different services. We look for partners, we identify ways to finance, and once these projects are have been approved, we also enter into the technical part. Our role in VITCAST is carrying out dissemination actions and communication ones. These actions are carried out with the aim of, on the one hand, the most important goal is to transfer the results and the outcomes of the research to the final users, but the opposite as well. Innovative practices that might be being carried out on the ground, in this case in viticulture or wine culture, we transfer them to the researchers, and we inform them about the needs, the barriers by final users, so that the research that is being carried out will give a solution to real problems and will be implemented, as well as knowledge exchange actions between different actors, wine growers, for example, final users, researchers, etc., so as to foster good practices. These activities that we carry out in FEUGA, in the viticulture sector, have been carried out for more than 10 years. We have experience in certain types of projects and others that are in preparation, and this is due to the importance of the winemaking sector in Galicia, which is our region. Here you can see different projects. You can see on the upper part of the, or the lower part of the screen, these are national projects, including VITCAST. And we also show other types of projects, more international ones, that are the ones that you can see on the top part of the slide. We have projects addressing enology, such as the development of models for the forecast of the yields of different types of grapes, for example. We have, for example, participated in IPM Works, the creation of a hub in the wine growing sector about the integrated control of infestations in the vineyard. And Vineo T, the goal of which is the application of precision viticulture sector based on IoT net sensors for the digital transformation. And focusing on VITICAST, well, this is an innovation project by an operational group. What's an operational group? Well, they gather agents of different profiles with common interests. On the one hand, the final users are represented, such as farmers, ranchers, companies, also researchers, or more transversal or cross-sectional entities such as FEUA are also represented here. We join forces in order to give a solution from different multi-sectoral points of view, so as to give a response to some issues, some problem. In this case, the problem of fungal diseases and the need to optimize the use of phytosanitary products. VITICAST is funded within the National Program for Rural Development 2014-2020 framework, and we have received a grant of almost 600,000 euros, and the total budget is 615,249.08 euros. So who can participate in this project, as well as all of you participating in this webinar? Well, we are represented mainly by Monet, Technology and Innovation. They are in charge of developing prediction and forecast models. Also, the other wine growers, such as Viña Costeira and Mata Romera, the Pontevedra City Council, Hacienda Monasterio, the FEUGA, and also we have outsourced the Vigo University, and we have 3 different collaborators with an interest on the results of the project and on whom we base ourselves so as to reach a wider audience. And I'm talking about the technological wine platform and the collaborators do Ribeiro and the Asociación Galega de Viticultura, which is the Galician winemaking association. Our goal is to improve the quality of the production and to develop the sustainable cultivation of the vine throughout the integrated management of the main fungal diseases, especially powdery mildew, downy mildew, and botrytis. This is in order to optimize the use of phytosanitary products, to improve the quality of the wine, to provide greater protection of the environment, and to optimize the production costs. Here you can see a summary of the project so as to be able to reach these different results. We have been developing these 3 fungal groups of fungi so as to develop grapevine phenological cycle, also using the meteorological or the weather stations. We also assess the meteorological conditions. We also work on meteorological prediction and forecast, as well as, and this is the major breakthrough of the project in terms of innovation, we also measure the concentration of spores. And the different partners in the project will speak and explain every one of the different legs of the project. And well, in this webinar, we have been giving some detail, but you will find more information on the project's webpage, which is www.viticast.es, and you will find also a tab on dissemination, where you will find different materials for your download. We have infography, dissemination articles, scientific articles, etc. And you will find news about our new results, publications on the mass media, TV, radio, press, and 2 technical videos where we give more details on how we count the spores. And there's another technical video for the development of models. As I was saying, www.viticast.es. And this is all from me. As I was saying, the different partners will give you the explanation of every one of the parts or the legs of this table. Well, we will hear the Deborah Franco, who will speak on behalf of Monet Tecnología and Innovation, and and we will also have Rosa Pérez from the Areiro Phytopathological Station in Pontevedra, Mr. Javier Rajo from the Vigo University, Mr. Carlos Alberte from Viña Costeira, Mr. Víctor Vendrell from Bodega Matorromera, and finally, Mr. Vicente Abete from Bodegas Hacienda Monasterio SL. So I am going to give the floor to Deborah Franco, they are a company that is giving support tools. Deborah, whenever you want, you can share your screen with us. Okay, thank you very much. I am going to explain very briefly what is VITICAST.
In order to explain the beginning of the project, as she just mentioned, I'm going to explain what is Monet. We were created in 2014 with a mission to provide sellers and producers a software to support. With this objective, we have developed Monet Viticultura, where we can control the vineyard from any internet-connected device. Our main line of research are prediction models of fungal diseases, and the main objective is to reduce uncertainty in order to decide when to apply a certain procedure. We started using the literature at the essays, and we started testing in different geographical areas with different types of grapes and different lots. The classical models analyzing the cycle of life of the fungus only take into account meteorological conditions, but with the objective of improving provision of these models, we decided to incorporate another very important area, which is phenology, variety of grape and other features of the crop. With this main research line, we then developed other lines such as meteorological prediction and phenology. In the second one, we developed models for the different varieties of grapes. And as for meteorology, it is important to have a local forecast affecting the lot, not the global one, the one we are more used to using. So to summarize, right now, Monet models take into account not just variables from the meteorological point of view, but also local variables. And that is where VITCAST was created, when we asked ourselves what were the other variables that we could be using. That's when we decided to analyze the spores in the atmosphere, so that we could find other information. In this slide, you can see this idea in a summarized way, where we can see on the upper screen captation or collection of information, of data. For that, we installed a weather station for each lot, so that we can have a meteorological forecast for that precise lot. Then we carry out a phenology research, or the technicians from the cellars carry out, as they will be explaining later on. And also we are alert to any symptoms of any diseases. And we also get information about any sort of dealing with the or action on the vineyards, such as, or more specifically, any treatments. We also catch or collect other data, as will be explained later on. The main objective is to use all these data in order to have a model providing risk information to decide on when and what is the best moment and best treatment to apply, the best moment to apply a treatment. The main problem addressed here is how to deal with these endemic diseases like the powdery mildew, downy mildew, and botrytis that can create very severe losses in production. Facing this problem, many times due to fear to lose part of the production, many phytosanitary treatments are excessive, or they do take into account meteorological conditions that don't really present any risk. This excess of phytosanitary products may lead to resistances, appearances of resistances. It is also an important significant risk of pollution, and increases production costs. Three very undesired effects, both for the sellers and society. Here you can see the participants in the project. As Lucia just mentioned, I would just say that Monet Viticultura, which I speak on behalf of, provided technological development. Then FEUGA offers the know-how on the dissemination of the project. We work with Mata Romera, Viña Costeira, and Hacienda Monasteiro, providing the lots and the material where to test. Also, the phytopathological station via Areiro is also providing us with space to test our model. And also the University of Vigo provides us with the media to research on the spores collected. We have subcontracted the University of Santiago de Compostela, and as collaborators, the different associations of sellers and viticulture. Our main objective, as Lucia was also mentioning, is to provide innovative solution in the treatment and prediction of fungal diseases, in this case is mildew, powdery dew, and botrytis, in order to improve the quality of wine and to protect our environment and to optimize production costs. All these objectives could be summarized in just one: to apply phytosanitary treatment only if there is a real and objective disease risk. In order to determine this risk, we start from the models developed by Monet, taking into account meteorological and phenological parameters, and we add information about the presence of the phytopathogen in the environment. We are working on 8 experimental lots scattered in the 4 assignation of appellation of origins, as you can see here, Rías Baixas, Ribeiro, Valdorras, and Ribera Duero. So where we established, we set up a spore collector, and we mark different vines where we carry out the study of both the meteorological and fungical data. We collect samples and we analyze the residue, and we compare the 2 areas, the VITCAST area and the conventional area. And then in order to compare if there has been an improvement in the wine, we also compare the collected wine in order to carry out an analysis, a comparative analysis. Well, here we can start talking about results, particularly mildew, downy mildew. The first thing we do to model mildew is to estimate the conditions for the ripening of the spores. Then we compare the results with the results of the ripening of spores in the field done by the phytopathological station in Areiro. And in 2021, we can see that in the area of Rías Baixas, Condado, and the area of Ribeiro, the ripening of spore was completed on March the 17th, as the EFA corroborated in its report. Then the Valdorras was the following one, and the last one was in Ribera del Duero on May the 9th. So we can see that ripening happens from east to west, and that there is around 2 months difference. Once the winter spore has ripened, we start calculating conditions so that the first infection can happen. In this particular case, in this slide, this was completed, this infection on April the 2nd. This infection process has an incubation process associated to it that can finish or not. In this case, it finished. It ended on April the 10th when it reached 100%, but sometimes incubation does not happen when, for instance, high temperatures occur. When this incubation starts going into jumps, ups and downs, that's when we can see the stains of mildew on the vine. The first one was seen on April the 7th. Once the primary incubation finishes, we start estimating the conditions of sporation, which were reached on the April the 10th. And then after sporulation is reached, we start calculating secondary infection and associated incubation processes, exactly the same as in the primary ones. This process is repeated all over the campaign, and it follows the same model of infection and associated incubation processes. In the case of powdery mildew, models take into account the level of pressure of the condition. That means that if the conditions are favorable or not to the reproduction of the fungus. When the risk is low, that means the pathogen is slowly reproducing so that we can extend the process of treatment. When the risk is high, that means that the interval between treatments should be shorter. In this graph, you see the results of one of the experimental lots in this campaign for 2 different models. The first model, shown in a continuous line, is a model based exclusively on meteorological conditions. And the model shown with dots here, apart from meteorological conditions, takes into account the phenological state. And its objective is to protect the grape. So in those times when the grape is more sensitive to the disease, we consider that the risk is higher. And when the crop, the grape is not as sensitive as compared to the other one, we consider that the risk is lower. So when we see this data, we see that both models work more or less in the same ways. You see that they are very similar areas, but when the grape was not as sensitive, we see a difference, a wider difference. So the difference between taking into account phenology as compared to one without that condition or that variable, that would affect us in the timing. If we consider a risk showing 100% risk, we would be applying one model than if the data would point otherwise. In the case of Pythotris, here we can see results of 4 significant episodes of Pythotris. And the first one was in May and the other one was in June. They were very sporadic episodes with just 2 days of duration with no symptoms on the vineyard. But at the beginning of July, 3 consecutive episodes of Pythotris were recorded. They lasted from the 2nd to the 8th of July, where we were able to appreciate, to see the symptoms. And also in August, there were 2 different episodes where we were able to see effects on the vineyard, and we could collect the data as such. Last but not least, as for results, I'm going to present the results for the prediction of spore concentration. The first thing to do is to collect with a collector the spores and then to count the spores. We will be listening to how this is done later on in the session, but I just wanted to say that very specific staff, very qualified staff must carry out this quantification. This staff collects the bands of spores and counts the spores using microscopes, and they delivered these graphs. For the 3 different fungus, we have a number of spores along the time, on the different dates of the campaign. This is what we use in order to feed the prediction models. Here you can see one of the neuronal networks used for the development of this model. The inputs are the measured data with the meteorological stations, and the outputs are the risk of disease. This neuronal network takes into account the spores recount or count, and also the field observations, both from the phenological point of view and also the symptomatology on the plants. We collect all the data from 2020 and 2021, and we divided that into 2 groups. The first group was the training data where that are used to train the model, and the other half are the test data. After the model is trained, we use the test data and we can see the performance. We can see that higher success percentage was achieved for Oidio, for downy mildew. And we also reflect here, in the case that there is a failure, we analyze whether that is a false positive or a false negative. That would mean that the model is saying that there is a risk when in fact there isn't any risk, which is not as serious as the opposite way around. That's what we use to minimize actual risk. And then what are the impact and benefits that we can achieve with this sort of tool? First of all, to improve environmental and social sustainability and the reduction of the use of phytosanitary products, which will enhance the competitiveness of the viticulture sector through wine qualities and less production costs. That was all from my side. Thank you so much. I will be at your disposal. Thank you so much. I just wanted to remind you all, if you have any questions, you can ask that in the platform section of questions and answers. Now, let's give the floor to the research centers. First of all, Rosa Perez in Areiro, belonging to the Diputación de Pontevedra. She is a chief or the phytopathology section of this institution. So, Rosa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucia. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. As Lucia was saying, I am Rosa Perez Zotero, and I'm going to tell you about the work that we conduct in the VITCAST, within the VITCAST framework in the center where I work in Areiro. For those people that have not been present in similar events, I would like to first introduce you to our center, the working center and the area. Areiro is an institute depending on the Pontevedra Council, which is a provincial local administration located in the area, the northwest area or corner of Spain in Galicia. We're a center devoted to practical research, to diagnosis and advice in terms of forestry and agriculture, in touching on different scopes such as edaphology, fruticulture and agroecology. And we work on both agriculture and forestry, as I said. We depend of a local administration, and although we have collaborations and projects where we participate with national or international institutions and companies, our main scope of work is our province, and therefore within that priority area of work, our function is, or our role is, to give advice to the province municipalities, the nearby municipalities. And the special feature of such a center, depending on a local administration, is that we are also agricultural warning center or station, because these stations normally have a more regional kind of reach, but in our case, it is a more local. Obviously, as I said, we depend on the Pontevedra Council, which is a local administration, so provincial administration. And in this province, the vine growing is the most important sector, or agricultural sector. And we have an appellation of origin, which is a quality seal for wines, which is Rías Baixas. This is the name of the appellation of origin. And you can see the black squares on the slide. These are the different areas composing this appellation of origin. And currently there is a new one, which is called Ribeiras do Morrazo, which is a protected geographical indication. And the most important variety for us in these places is Albariño, which is a variety of white wine, as everybody knows, a white wine variety. Apart from these two things, I mean appellation of origin and protected geographical indication, as I was saying, vineyards are extremely important for us, and there are many plots that are out of these quality and protection figures or scopes, where wine growers carry out their interventions without having any technical criteria, in some occasions, or many occasions, according to pre-established schedules, and where the goals are goals and necessary goals imposed by the European Union in terms of strategy development to benefit the environment, and that should not be harmful for human health, such as traditional practices. Well, these measures are not about by the ones proposed by the European Union and also on a worldwide level. Within this scope, trying to correct those bad practices that many of these plots conduct that are normally very small, extremely small plots or exploitations, but even including bad practices in the appellation of origin areas, there are some proposals such as what VITCAST is proposing, and also phytosanitary warnings, which are used as support tools for farmers so that they can better protect their crops, in this case, vineyards. It is very important. This is very important in our province because, as I was saying, there is a lot of vineyard spread across the geography, the local geography, and there are many farmers that do not live directly out of vineyard, but they conduct systematic interventions that should be rejected or abandoned. So these phytosanitary warnings give advice and indicate whether there is a risk or not. And we in Areiro are also including the results of the VITICAST project outcomes. We have been dealing with warnings for 20 years, and a lot of people read our publications. The Areiro phytosanitary warnings, which are the justification of why Areiro is participating on this project, we conduct them using 3 different vineyard plots in the Rías Baixas appellation of origin, so the Sarnés, El Rosal, and El Condado areas. In 2019, we started with the Ribeiras do Morrazo protected area, but then the famous pandemic came, limiting our movements, and we had to reduce the number of excursions or outings on the ground. What we where we intervene is in these plots, control plots that you can see here, are always according the Areiro indications. And we also have some other plots that we visit here and then, or sometimes, and the wine grower intervenes according to their own criteria, either in a systematic way or whenever they can, because, as I said, not all wine growers devote 100% of their time to these tasks. So summing up or adding our Areiro knowledge plus VITICAST results, we make these warnings or phytosanitary warnings. And I have to say, I would like to show off a little, and I would like to say that we're doing pretty well. We provide these warnings every week. We communicate on Friday normally. This is the day chosen for this. And our statistics appear in our webpage, as you can see here, and you can see that the visitors or the visits to our webpage during those days increase significantly. Once we have presented what is Areiro, and once I have explained why are we participating in this project, I am going to tell you what do we do within the project or in the framework of the project. In our case, and we will see that a bit later on, we've focused on mildew. And this is due to the fact that, as you have seen, Pontevedra, the province, is located at the northwest of Galicia, well, of Spain, which is an area with humid, clearly humid climate due to the Atlantic influence, and also with very mild and soft temperatures that tend to be a bit high, warm. Those people not optimizing their treatments in such a year as the current one, where we have precipitations and high temperatures, they can apply up to 20 different treatments in just one season, which is absolutely crazy. Furthermore, taking into account that due to bad advice, some people are applying more than one phytosanitary product against mildew at a certain moment because somebody just told them to do so. Well, so you have a mixture of anti-mildew treatments plus something against the oidium or against some pests that we might not have. Well, the environmental risk is obvious, and hence the need to implement more sustainable strategies, obviously, with no doubt. Our work in Areiro, summing up, is we determine in a practical way the spore germination of P. viticola, the pathogen. Then we conduct a follow-up and a monitoring of grapevine phenology in our plots. We also carry out monitoring of downy mildew symptoms. In every one of the plots, we have spore collectors, and we collect, count, and identify those spores. Then we decide on the moment to treat the plant in our plots according to the climate forecast and the climate current data and the different forecasts or weather forecasts. We also test or assess that whether the treatments have been efficient, which is normally not or has not been done in our area traditionally, but it is absolutely essential. And we are now, providing or giving these phytosanitary warnings and advice, and we decide upon the application of treatments. And we also make these warnings. So our methodology is practical for the determination of spore germination of P. viticola. From 1997, we have been doing or carrying out this, following this methodology, thanks to an Interreg project. So we use this method in order to provide information in our phytosanitary warnings and within VITICAST in order to compare with the results of the models. This practical method can be read in the bibliography, but let's say that in autumn we collect leaves that were suffering from mildew in our area. This affects almost every area. Then we see them under the magnifying glass, the binocular magnifying glass, and we detect the spores that you can see here under the microscope. We cut the leaf area with spores, and we introduce them in these double mesh bags that we cover very lightly with sand on the upper part, and we bury them, simulating the hibernation or winter, overwinter conditions. Then in spring, we collect those bags, we put them in ideal conditions in the laboratories, and we verify that the spores have germinated and produced the oospores. In this graph, you can see all the records of the maturation data for these spores in case of mildew, the first downy mildew symptoms. And we can see that our theory, that is very wet and soft winters, accelerate the maturation of oospores before time. But this is not a 100% kind of rationale, because we had a very, very dry winter, which was 2017, and you can see the maturation day of the oospore was more or less the same. So even though VITICAST is a technological tool, with this you can prove that the fields, well, the presence on the ground is still, or on the field is still essential. Once the oospore is mature or has started its ripening process, then we monitor the grapevine phenology. You can see the two plots from the air. The first one is the vineyard of the Areiro phytopathologic station in itself. It's a relatively young plot, 12 years of age. And the other plot is not our own. It belongs to proprietor, an owner that has been with us for many, many years, and she collaborates with us in the phytosanitary warnings in these plots. We conduct the follow-up, and it is us who decide what to do and when to do it. So it's not our own plot, but, well, more or less to practical effects, it is our own plot. And the age of this plot is 42 years. Here you can see the different events. On the 11th of August, we stopped because from the moment that practically no interventions can be done, of course, we don't go to the ground or in the field very often. And in our plot, we decide on which treatments are going to be applied following the 3 criteria that you can read on the screen. And of course, as Lucia or Deborah mentioned before, out of the new treatments or the new technologies, the most avant-garde one or the most innovative one is the spore counting. So we use the knowledge of the Vigo University and some other academia institution. I'm going to give the floor later to the Vigo colleague or the Vigo University colleague. So I'm going to just say that we prepare in our lab the different collectors. We prepare the cylinder with the band that collects the different spores. And in our laboratory, we prepare the samples and we count them. You can see here that on the first year of our project, we started counting on the 18th of September. And this was because the famous pandemic forcing us to all movement, person and good movement restrictions, plus the lockdowns of people, plus the bureaucracy linked to the fact of us belonging to an administration. Well, all this led to us having only one collector, and we received our first and only one collector in August. In 2021, we had the second collector, but we had some operational problems or technical problems with it. Well, with the 2 collectors purchased, but we succeeded in putting the 2 collectors to work in spring. And you can see the daily count, which are similar graphs to the ones presented by Deborah before. Even though here we don't have many spores at the beginning or figure in the graph in the beginning, it was due to the fact that, as I'm saying, in those two green areas, until early May, no more than 10 sporangia per day and no more than 50 until the end of May. I'm talking about mildew only because we don't have many spores in case of oidium in our plots. We can apply 1 or 2 treatments per season. And in terms of botrytis, the specialists know that this is a pathology that depends on the previous health state of the grapes or the plants, the grapevine. And then, for example, if the moths in the cluster do not give problems, then botrytis is really reduced importantly. So here you have the number of treatments that we applied both in the VITCAST and the conventional plots with the plant distribution that you can see here. These are the ones in Areiro in our plot, where we can see that the plants, the VITCAST plants are concentrated in this area, except for the foreign one and the ones here in VITCAST. And this is due to the special situation of the Areiro plots, where we see mildew highly concentrated in the first half of the plot because it is subject to much more shady areas. And well, the rest of the plot is VITCAST is occupied by VITCAST plants. If the results are good in this area, the VITCAST plants that are subject to more mildew pressure or pressure by mildew, we understand that they are going to work well in this, give good results in this plot. As Areiro belongs to the council, the Pontevedra Council, we perform a lot of experiments, and we have in row number 7, we have decided to not treat this row. So this is a row without treatments to observe natural pathogen evolution. And of course, here the number of spores is much higher than in the other plot, the 42-year-old plot corresponding to the individual owner or proprietor. It is not about reducing treatments, but optimizing them. We have lowered the use of anti-mildew treatments from 15 to 10 treatments in the plot, and this is conducted in our Areiro plot, where we never applied conventional treatments. Of course, we were against it from the beginning, and we were not able to trim our Areiro plot before March, and therefore it was a bit late in the year. On the other hand, this is the 42-year-old plot, the one corresponding to the individual proprietor or owner. And you can see here the conventional part. We have reduced treatments from 9 because, well, they were really 8 because the 9th was given because the owner became a bit nervous. She's a woman, and she did not dare to be to act in such a risky way. So it was 8 really, not 9, as you can see here on the slide, versus 16. The woman knows that she should not apply so many treatments as she used to in the past. This is the same, including in Areiro and San Marcos, the treatment application moments or times. And I have marked 3 that are especially outstanding, where we advanced ourselves a little bit to the maximum spore peak. It is very high in Areiro because the collector is located in those plants that were untreated, so the control row. We also applied, assessed the effectiveness of these treatments, and you can see here the San Marcos VITCAST plot results. Well, sorry, this is wrong. This is conventional. San Marcos conventional, where both in developed and young leaves, we see that the percentages of healthy leaves are really high. And here you see the same for the San Marcos cluster, and here for Areiro clusters. And you can see here a high percentage of healthy clusters or bunches. And even though in Areiro we reduced treatments, the percentages are excellent. Logically, in terms of young leaves, the results are not so good because we have stopped our interventions very early in our plots. And therefore, all the mildew that comes to the young leaves, we leave the mildew develop in those leaves. It doesn't matter to us because the plants in our vineyards are really developing very well, and we have enough leaves so as to allow for a good grape ripening. I forgot to say that the few affected leaves and clusters did never exceed the percentage of the occupied surface area, 99, 96%. And an innovation that we have introduced, which is not included in the VITICAST project, we have introduced this because we cannot conduct vitrovinifications. This is related to the study of phytosaid mites, because a lot of specialists, as a lot of specialists know, the most natural enemies of the plants are more abundant in those areas, untreated areas. The useful phytosaid mites are very sensitive to interventions in the environment or in the atmosphere, and also very sensitive to human interventions. In a previous test, we checked that comparing a vineyard plot treated conventionally according to the wine growers' criterion in comparison with an optimization of treatments criterion, the results were much better in terms of the presence of phytosaid mites that can be used as a bioindicator of the quality of these leaves. And as you can see here, these are results only from the last year. According to our data, we see that in the Areiro plot, except for this date where we have the same number of phytosaid mites in the VITICAST and in the conventional plots, we see that in general we have more phytosaid mites in the VITICAST, and although we need to say that we have many in the conventional plot. Why? Because in Areiro we have been optimizing treatments for years in our vineyard in terms of strategy and also the types of products that we're using. We're using the least aggressive products for the environment, products. So in San Marcos, the differences are not so evident, but still we see that the results are not bad, which would open a new research or work line, or who knows, maybe a continuity for the VITICAST project. So this is all from me. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much, Rosa, for your presentation. If you have any question for the different presentations, you can leave them in the Q&A in the chat.
Particularly the research group of investigation on fungal diseases and infection. He will be talking about the count of spores, etc. So Javier, when you want, all yours. You can start your presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending this webinar on this project that we are carrying out. Well, I will start my presentation, my participation in this session of dissemination by saying or presenting the two aspects of the project where our university is working on. That is the first one, reducing the number of treatments, and also, well, VITCAST is not just focused on phytosanitary treatments, but also on assessing incidence of climate change on vineyards in our areas. I will start with the first part with the adequation of phytosanitary treatments. Okay, let's go ahead. Since 1995, we've been working on treating or attempting to reduce the phytosanitary treatments on the vineyards, starting from the principle of the triangle of disease. A disease only occurs when three circumstances happen at the same time. First, we have the pathogen on the ambience. Second, that the plant is right then at a phenological state, favorable for the reproduction of the pathogen. And three, that at that time when the pathogen is in the vineyard, that the meteorological conditions are again favorable for the pathogen to induce disease in that vineyard. If any one of the three factors does not happen, or let's say we do not meet that meteorological conditions or the phenological state or the pathogen is not on the vineyard, then the treatment should not be necessary. In order for us to assess when the pathogen is in the vineyard, we use biosensors like the concentrations of spores in the atmosphere, because the appearance of a spore means the presence of symptoms, visualized symptoms on the leaves and the bunches of the vineyard, depending on the phenological state between 4 and 7 days after the presence. So the existence of spores on the vineyard is going to indicate how much of the pathogen is there, and then we can avoid that the vineyard suffers the symptoms and lose bunches or lose part of the vine. Let's look into the detail of the three aspects. For the, well, we use these volumetric stations. We put them in the middle of the vineyard, and these catalyzers aspire the air in the vineyard at a speed of 10 liters per minute. That is more or less the same as a human. So the air goes into this tool, and we can see the composition of the air, let's say. So the air goes into this hole, and inside this piece, the spores are retained. And here, the black stain show the different particles in the atmosphere. We take these pieces, we take them into the lab, and then we process all the samples that we will be looking through the microscope. Here you can see the different pathogens, cells, the conidiums of Erysipecae with this shape, and the sporanges of sporangia. We analyze this in the laboratory, and we can create the curves of presence or absence of the pathogen. Here we can see the three different spores, and we can see an example here. We see here how they look in the microscope, and it is very clear that the pathogen is there. We can see the different particles. It is very difficult to differentiate them, but we do this using a by hiring very specialized qualified staff, and thanks to our long-standing experience where we have collected so many samples. This methodology enables us to know concentrations of spores in the vineyard during the whole year round, and then we can identify the treatments to be applied. In this slide, you can see the biological cycle. In this slide, we see the biological cycle of the downy mildew. You can see the sexual cycle and also the evolution of the spore. And on the right side, you see the concentration of the spores all through the different stages of the phenology of the plant. We can see then the primary infection. So you see here on the beginning of March, this is the proliferation of the spores, the winter spores, and no bunch in the vineyard can be affected in this case, but at least we are able to see and to identify the primary infections that we can later on assess if we will be having many secondary infections or not. This primary infection can be a result of, let's say, to leave debris on the vineyard, etc. And that is why we need to remove all those debris before March. Now, looking into results of the VITCAST project itself, when we assess them by phytopathogen, if we analyze the different concentrations in the different vineyards, we see that in the more Atlantic area, in the Rías Baixas area, that's where more plasmopara were. This means that we need to carry out very strong treatments, and the impact on the plant will be also to be significant. And by or towards the end, to the center of Spain, its presence was almost insignificant. In the case of powdery mildew, we see that in the central area here, between the Mediterranean area and the northern area, it show higher incidence on the vineyard with a peculiarity. In the area of Euro-Siberian area, the pressure lasts until the month of June, and from then on, it happens on the Ribera del Duero with higher concentrations of powdery mildew, together with severe issues with infection processes on the vineyard. Finally, in the case of patotis, the area where more incidence was, or potentially is more identified, is in the area of the Ribeiro, as compared to the other two areas where its incidence is very, very small. When we assess incidence of a total of fungal spores by or per area, we will see that in the Rías Baixas, Plasmopara is the more commonly found, and in the Ribeiro area, in the frontier, in the border between the Mediterranean and Atlantic worlds, botrytis is the one with the higher incidence, and in the Valdeorras, more or less the same, and in the Ribera del Duero area, we have a similar performance, but pressure in the vineyards by the powdery mildew is higher than in the other two. With all these concentrations of spores that we collect in the vineyard and through several different models, we can enhance the prediction horizon in order to predict when the spores will be located, will be found in the vineyard, and we can expand this horizon prediction, or this prediction horizon, so that we are able to know with 2 or 3 days in advance. So before the stain appears on the leaves, we are able to go into action and combine all that with the meteorological data. But for a disease to happen, we also need, so to say, to have a plant at a phenological stage susceptible to have the disease inside. How do we know that? Well, we find the chill requirements and heat requirements of the plant in order to go through the different phenological stages. These Monet viticulture has monitored all these and modelized them, creating an app informing us when the plants of the different appellations of origin within the study will be at that precise stage where a fungus is able to attack or not. And finally, meteorological conditions are also digitalized thanks to Monet viticulture in order to know through algorithms when exactly the circumstances occur so that the fungus can reproduce or not. With all this data used with the VITCAST project, we can then combine all this information, not just to know when the treatment can be applied, but also with several months in advance, what is the type of production that we will be having, which is one of the applications of the VITCAST project. To know several months in advance how the production will be in a different area that will help us to know how many people to hire, also to know what the amount of the insurance will be in order to protect from losses in production, and also to avoid presence in the different appellation of origin of foreign grape varieties that may lead to alterations in the wine. Here, for instance, you can see different models that have been already developed for the Godello variety. In these lines, you can see estimated production using our models. And in these bars, we see the actual production of the plot. And then we can see how these models are very, very good at predicting exactly the type of or the size of the production, in this case, with 3 months in advance. A second part where we are working on with the VITCAST project is the impact of climate change on these 4 areas. With the one with the Atlantic influence, the second one with the influence of both Atlantic and Mediterranean, a second transition area, and a fourth one, a totally Mediterranean area. We have already published this paper. Any of you who are interested, you can on it you can download it from the VITCAST website. We have published it as reachable by all the public. We analyze the bioclimatic indexes in viticulture used all over the world, like Winkler, Hugling, Cool-Night Index, BBLI and GSS and GSP, and we apply them in these 4 areas between 1950 and 2015. And finally, with the estimation of temperatures from 2050 to 95. Here we can see several maps presented in our paper on how climatic conditions have varied since 1950 to 2015. And the red dots, or the red areas, show how big these variations have been recorded. And here you can see how the different predictions or forecasts using the different indexes are represented in the second period, the second timeline. We will be seeing differences in the meteorological conditions in our areas of research, particularly in the RCP 8.5. That means conditions that are or with an increase of temperatures, the highest increase in temperatures in the future. As a summary, we can say regarding this climate change impact, we can say that in the future there will be an upward trend for these different indexes, Winkler, Hugling, Night Cold Index and GSS indexes. This means that these indices will be higher, whereas the BBLI and GSP, depending more on precipitation and humidity, rates will be negative. So rain will be less intense in the future. These climatic conditions could vary for the crop in the future, and we've seen that these conditions will vary much more in the Mediterranean bioclimatic areas than in the Euro-Siberian one, because the ocean is like a factor for these temperature variations. So areas right now too cold for cultivation of the vine will or may be suitable areas for the cultivation of wine, mainly in the more altitudinal areas of the more Mediterranean areas. So viticulture could be introduced in these areas. Additionally, these negative changes observed in the BBLI and GSP indices related to lower humidity and less or fewer rain rates will help us to reduce the possibility of a mildew attack on grapevines, mainly in the areas in the Euro-Siberian region, as we saw before, plasmopara and downy mildew has a very high incidence. This trend of increasing temperature will cause some variations in cultural practices, such as the change of grape varieties. Very surely we will have to introduce changes in the uses of cultures with irrigation treatments in many vineyards, and transition of vineyards to higher areas with colder temperatures than right now. Thank you so much for your attention. This is more or less my collaboration, my contribution from the University of Vigo. I am here to answer you any questions that you may have. Thank you so much, Javi. If you have any questions, you can please write them in the chat and we will be answering them later on. So let's give the floor now to the last section from the three different vineyards. First is Carlos Alberte by Viña Costeira. He is Director of Viticulture. So Carlos, whenever you want, you can share your screen and open your mic and your camera.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for being here and for your attention. I am going to speak about the characteristics of the VITCAST project in Viña Costeira wine grower company. We are established since 1968. In fact, you read 1986, but it's 68. Sorry, the numbers should be changed. I did not notice this. We are established in Galicia, in the Ribeiro and Valdeorras appellation of origins. And we are very sensitive to mildew and botrytis, and especially in Ribeiro, because our climate, our soil, our conditions make us have fantastic potential characteristics for the production of high quality white wines, but it also demands a lot from us because our wine growing activities are really demanding. We have around 50 hectares, grouping up more than 500 hectares of vineyards for wine growers. And we have done a big effort, a great effort to enhance autochthonous varieties such as Godello, Albariño, Treixadura, Loureira for making high quality and fruity white wines with remarkable good natural acidity, very low technique need of or resort to techniques because the natural parameters and the natural conditions make us or provoke us have these magnificent wines? Well, we have several plots. One of the exploitations is the San Cibrao estate. It is included in the Ribeiro appellation of origin with 12 hectares, 16 plots. The altitude is around 200 and 280 meters above sea level, with the Treixadura, Alvarinho, Godello, and Loureira varieties as main varieties. It was planted in 2001. It was a pioneer estate because at that moment in that area, mountainous area or hilly area, there had never been a vineyard. And well, it's giving us it's 12 hectares, as said, and it might seem to be very, very small, but in this area, in this context, it is a large extent. Another estate is the Pazo de Toubes estate with 8.5 hectares. It dates back to 1985 with 7 plots, and the altitude is between 220 and 290 meters above sea level. The varieties are Treixadura, Alvarinho, and Loureira. It was a plot which required many costs to work on it, but it is giving us very good yields and very good results, and we are proud of it. The other estate I wanted to present is the Valdeorras appellation of origin. And we in Viña Costeira, the VITCAST project is giving us a lot of information when it comes to preventing and especially recommending our wine growers phytosanitary treatments in a way or a different way. We are very predictive thanks to the information from weather stations, from Spore panels located at the vineyards, with not real-time information, but a very high frequency information that indicate the phytosanitary pressure in the vineyard. And we are very quick when it comes to phenological states and direct observation of fungi disease symptoms of the ones we study, mildew and botrytis. And additionally, because of its presence here in the Ribeiro area, the presence of Guignardia bidwelli or black rot. And we put a lot of importance on the weather forecast. Good weather forecasts are paramount to us to prevent any possible treatment or prevent any problems thanks to those treatments. We have weather stations in Toubes, another one in San Cibrao, and the Ribeiro appellation of origin, and the third one is in the Valdeorras appellation of origin in the Abeleira estate. The advantage, thanks to these weather stations, is that they give us real-time information. At any moment, we can consult on the mobile phone what are the data on humidity, maximum and minimum temperatures, thanks to Monet and the information and the program they provide us with. In terms of the Spore panels that are conducted by the Vigo University, the Ourense campus, what they do is to capture and measure the fungal pressure on vineyards. We have them in Toubes and San Cibrao, in Ribeiro, in the Ribeiro appellation of origin, and in Abeleira in the Valdeorras appellation of origin. And these data come weekly. There's a weekly spore count, and we have a very good vision of the presence, the non-tangible presence of the main fungi diseases. And as you can see in the photograph, we have a very keen observation of symptoms. We conduct these observations every week with a frequency of 2-3 days per week. And our main risk here is, well, we have a high risk of big yield loss, both in terms of quality and quantity. So from April to September, we are constantly present in the vineyard, trying to avoid or to prevent phytosanitary problems that would have a repercussion, negative repercussion on our crop. This belongs to 2019, which was a complicated year in terms of mildew. You can see the symptoms in the cluster. We see attacks in not only the clusters, but also in the leaves with very clear symptoms. You see here symptoms of black rot. In this case, the Wignardia bidwelli. Our presence, as I said, from April to September on the field is really, really high because, of course, we need to keep an eye on these vineyards. And with these data, we perform a weekly observation and we compare these observations. The University of Vigo provides us with the graphs, and we can even establish a relationship between the spore level that might be present effectively at a certain point of time and the treatments that have been applied. This is more kind of clerk's or desk job, but we need to establish some type of relationship between the level of spores and the treatments applied. And this allows us to anticipate our actions to the treatment or even to avoid some treatment. In some cases, we have been able to not use or not apply some treatments because we have put together all the cases regarding climate data, spores data, and weather forecasts, as well as the phenological state and the absence or presence of symptoms. And therefore, in the Ribeiro appellation of origin, which is a rather complicated appellation of origin, our system is really reliable. It provides us with very good value predictions according to phenological states, climate conditions, spore counting, and observation of symptoms. We try to avoid unnecessary treatments or unnecessary applications of treatments, and we try to also provide our wine growers with the most real and best advice possible. We try to minimize quantitative and qualitative losses of the crops, and we try to preserve our excellent raw matter, our tradition, according to tradition, trying to value organoleptic characteristics, preserving grapes from damage or alterations. Thank you very much. I'm open to any questions that you might want to write on the chat, and it's been a pleasure presenting this work to you. Thank you very much, Carlos. We are going to now give the floor to the next presentation, the Bodega Matarropera presentation. Víctor Vendrell, who is the Research and Development Manager in Bodega Matarropera, he's going to present. Okay, thank you very much. So I have not shared the screen yet, right? Just give me a sec, please. Okay, share screen.
Perfecto, Víctor. Ahora sí.
Perfect, Victor. Thank you. I would like to put it in presentation mode. This is it. Can you see it? Yes, perfectly well. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. And my name is Víctor Vendrell. I work in the R+D department of Bodegas Matarromera. Well, it's a family company, really, a family business, Mata Romera. The VITICAST project for us is represented an opportunity to learn, of course, and in fact, we are obtaining results to be able to develop a predictive model phase 2 diseases, and a very useful one, I have to say. Mata Romera is a company or a business that is really present with different sellers in different appellations of origin, different wineries. But we focus the main part of our activities in Castilla y León. And in terms of the VITICAST project, well, we have focused on the Ribera del Duero, sorry, which is where we have 225 hectares, well, a bit more, because this data come from some time ago. And Mata Romera might be the winery with the largest extension in this area. Apart from the Ribera del Duero appellation of origin, we're present in Toro, in Cigales, and in Rueda. You see here the Douro River. You see here a zoom in, and there is a plot heterogeneity in terms of when trying to tackle test, for example, the spore collector. We need to choose very carefully what kind of type of plot we want to locate it. We were having 3 candidates, like the plateau, then the riverbank, so the limestone hills, the riverbank, which is along the river Douro, and then we have, well, sorry, the plateau, the riverbank, and the limestone hills. Sorry, I was reading it the other way around. In these plots, in the limestone hills, we produce the best Mata Romera wines. And we were especially interested on the Solanas plot, which was the one that we finally chose. This is the shape of this plot. You could see it in the drawing. It is a rather large plot with more than 20 hectares, where we grow Tempranillo, especially. The name Solanas is given due to the fact that it is exposed to the sun almost all day. It is oriented northwest to west, and it was planted in 1994. And what is the climate like there? Well, it is continental Mediterranean type of climate, and there are rather important thermal oscillations between the different seasons from minus 10 degrees Celsius to plus 42 degrees Celsius. So you see the oscillations are rather extreme. And in terms of rainfall, well, there is a moderate low rainfall between 400 and 600 millimeters of water. We have very dry summers and long winters. Something which is typical of the Ribera del Duero area is that the thermal oscillations are really important. Thermal oscillations that usually occur during the ripening season, registering optimal daytime temperatures for development against cold nights. And these differences range between 10 and 20 degrees, or 15 and 20 degrees. And we focus our efforts here in the Las Solanas estate or vineyard, because this is it is paradigmatic for the Mata Romera, because the best wines are coming from this plot due to the exceptional quality of the grapes, like Reserva or Prestige. Pago de las Solanas, Reserva, and Prestige. These are the three most important names in the Mata Romera production. Well, you can imagine that there is a triangle with these three parameters, and the combination of them are going to allow us to develop a predictive model. And this is what the VITICAST project is focused on. And therefore, our goal would be to develop a risk model in order to have a rational use and coherent use of phytosanitary products. This has been mentioned before by the previous speakers. All the advantages of rationally using phytosanitary products due to many reasons. One of them is the economic reason, but of course the abuse of such chemicals is a problem because these substances are really harmful. And therefore, everything that means reducing them and focusing on the moment, the perfect moment to apply them, would be an advance. In this triangle, we are interested in three parameters or three types of data. Phenology is one of them. Phenology is important because, among other things, the parasite fungus, as any parasite, synchronizes its life cycle with the life cycle of the host. And therefore, there are moments, the plant development, where these plants are more vulnerable to the presence of the fungus in this case. It is also very important to think about the weather. What is the weather like now? What is the weather like tomorrow? This information is provided to us by the weather stations. And of course, the third part of the triangle, the third angle, would be the spores. Amount of spores, type of spores, the spore ID, and therefore the sampler becomes key here. We were having difficulties during the first year, of course, because of the due to the complicated situation of the pandemic, of the COVID-19. We are in the second year of development of this project, and what do we do now? As I indicated in the previous scheme, phenology is the foremost and most important part. We make a follow-up of phenology in order to compare it with other data. As of course, the spores sampler, we collect spores, which is different to other wineries that participate in the VITICAST project. We have been for the last 2 years acquiring knowledge in order to be able to identify the spores. We have a microscope that allows, well, there is a lab that allows us to use their microscope, and we are working on the identification of these spores. We see here an image of the spores collector or sampler in the Las Solanas plot and the weather station beside it. And therefore, the second leg or angle of the triangle is there. So phenology, spores sampler, and of course, the weather stations or the weather forecast, which is the third leg of the model. Firstly, what we did was to select the vineyard, Solanas in this case, and the VITICAST plot, or the different rows and lines. So we have a control row, and then we have the area where we reduce the use of products and different, well, the different products, and therefore we, or our inputs, right? So we collect samples of the control row, and what would be the activity by the by this winery? Well, one of the activities obviously is to provide information for the model, that is to feed the model with information as it was said at the beginning of the presentation, through the sampling. What do we sample? Well, aerobiological study, of course, every week we collect the spores, we put them at the microscope and we try to identify them and we note down what we see. Then the soil, in order to be able to compare the treatments to see whether they were effective. Like, for example, if the central row, the control row has been affected or not affected by these treatments. And then, of course, the wine, which is the third part of the sampling. What is our experience? Well, according to our experience, the model is working. We have compared information on mildew, oidium, botrytis, spores count. We're not assessing the number of spores, only whether they are present or absent. In the case of oidium and botrytis, we have cross data with the weather station. We have data from the 19th, 22, 25 days of the month in July, and according to the prediction of the weather station on risks, you see the oidium is high on the 19th and on the 22nd. And this coincides with our observations, and this is very important to validate the technique, because what we see in the sampler or the collector is reflected in a predictive weather model. So we are even improving this model. We are refining the model, and therefore we can say that it is a useful model. So the second year, we performed a second validation. We repeated the tasks that we have to develop under the project, both collecting spores, soil samples, and vinifications. And therefore, what are the conclusions in Matarromera that can be extracted or drawn from all this activity? Well, we want to develop a spore concentration prediction model to reduce the number of phytosanitary products, not only the quantity, but in order to be able to apply them at the certain specific, the appropriate moment, the ideal moment, and in the ideal quantity. Even though weather station would give us an indication of the possible presence of fungal infections, the response by the winery is to apply phytosanitary products to all the vineyards, because of course there is a risk there. But that involves a huge expense, especially in such a winery as Matarromera, with such an extension of surface, and also taking into account that up to 80% of this application is absolutely useless. And we can optimize as well the number of times we apply these products from the phytosanitary point of view. We must not forget the goal of phytosanitary products. Reaching this first threshold or risk threshold, we will have to understand that it is not only the presence of these infectious agents which is risky, but the amount, the concentration of what we call the propagules is also interesting and important for us. And therefore, in collaboration with other wineries of the area, we are able to conduct or create an algorithm to identify times of infection based on meteorological data. And we are also optimizing, hence, the number of phytosanitary chemical treatments in viticulture. I hope that my presentation was interesting for all of you. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, now thank you very much, Victor. Now we are giving the floor to Vicente Abete, who is the responsible person to speak for this second, the last winery that is going to give us a presentation today. Thank you very much, Vicente.
Can you see it? Okay, it's still loading. We only see your black screen, so maybe you have to go back one step, maybe. Okay, I will share again my screen. Yes, now you have to put it in full screen. I'm doing that. Yes, but maybe you have to go to the very first slide and then try that again. Yes, that's it. Sorry about that. So this is the very first screen. I shall put it in full screen mode, but no way. I don't know what's happening here. Just don't worry, even though you don't share it in full screen mode, we can see it properly. So shall I leave it like this? Yes, don't worry. We are not really sure about what's happening, but we can read it properly, so don't worry. You can use this mode. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. Welcome. My name is Vicente Abete. I am responsible of viticulture in the Hacienda Monasterio winery. I am responsible for this area in the cellar. First of all, I will explain our job a bit. This winery is located in Pesquera de Duero village in the province of Valladolid, in the right hand of the river at around 800 meters of altitude. It was created in 1991. So right now the vineyard has around 30 years with 90 hectares in a southward hill protected from the north by a highland just right on our back, so protected from the northern winds. The climate type is a continental, very funny one because it has a high contrast, very stark contrast. This vineyard has a very dry soil, but a high stark contrast between day and night, and winter time is really, really chill. Rain is not too high, but only happens in springtime and in autumn. As for the types of winery, of grapes, is Tinto Fino on clones selected from old vines from the region. And then it's 13% of Cabernet Sauvignon and a 5% of Merlot and 2% of Malbec used in the final mix. We get just one wine as a result of all these types of grapes. In the end, the mix is created using all these grapes. Sorry. So we take all the grapes collected by hand using boxes or crates during 3 weeks between 18 to 23 degrees. Then there is a maceration process to extract as much of the skin of the grape, and then we carry out a malolactic fragmentation. And all throughout this period, we extract as much presence possible of the wood in the wine, and then we carry out 2 months in 2 month period in the cellar, and then we had 3 different wines with varied times in the cellar. But the composition is more or less the same as shown before. They are wines from the parcel. It's just one wine as a result from a mix of a variety of grapes. Since the very beginning, we have been working with biological agriculture certified by the CAECID, that is the they call a biological Agriculture Council of Castilla and Leon, certifying that all our wines comply with the regulation. These certificates, the way we understand viticulture, we always gave or put the highest importance to the care of the soil and the environment. We don't, or we consider that the use of pesticides and herbicides only alter our identity. So we try as much as possible to avoid the use of pesticide so that our wines will have highest identity, highest character, typical of our environment. In line with all this, with the respect to the environment, when the idea was brought to us to collaborate with the VITCAST project, we decided that to keep on researching on offering the best wines and grapes with the highest respect. That is why we decided to control the number of spores and the time of a collection of spores and how they have an impact on the diseases. And that is why we selected a plot in line with our philosophy. That is a plot with the same orientation, southward, on a slope, cultivated in the type of vine, vertical vines with very low yielding, around 1 kilo per hectare. No, sorry, 3,500 kilos per hectare. Once we started collecting spores from the 3 fungi, botrytis, mildew, or powdery and downy mildew, we started seeing results and understanding what was happening in our vineyard and how to better minimize and, as Rosa said, to use as much as the best we could the treatments. We saw that botrytis is very low in presence in our areas compared to Galicia. So the number of spores in botrytis, and as we will be seeing before in downy mildew, we see 2 main peaks, but not at all significant. It is very rare that in our area we will be having problems with botrytis. We normally find them at the end of the campaign. And as you can see by the number of spores collected during this time, incidence is almost none. In the case of powdery mildew, as Javier was mentioning before, this is the disease that is the most usual one affecting us and creating severe problems to us, because it is a condition, a disease that starts very soon. Before the flower, we have already powdery mildew, and all throughout the campaign and winter time, we collect spores. There are ups and downs in the number of spores, but we have 5 significant ones all throughout the cycle, and this creates problems, and we need to monitor it continuously. And the last presence of fungi is the downy mildew. As you can see here, it's a very low presence with only one significant peak coinciding with the rainfall. And our Galician colleagues are really, or must surely be very jealous of us because of these very low downy mildew presence. So it is not really affecting us thanks to our continental climate, very dry climate, where this spore is really difficult to see here. With all this data collected, we are able to understand how to use and when and in which doses the different treatments. And we see that the preventive treatments, always with biological products, at the beginning of the campaign, do not really have any sense at all. We always start with stems between 20 to 30 centimeters, but only in the case of high rainfall, we won't be seeing any problems. And the same with, with the powdery and mildew and botrytis. But the very first focus, the very first times when we will be seeing higher number of spores, that happens at the end of May, and in our area that means in the middle of the flowery or blossoming moment. If we consider all this data now, knowing the number of spores, our conclusion is that we can stop applying the first treatment, and that will improve our care for the environment, and also we will, let's say, use less machinery, something that sometimes is not taken into account because we will be avoiding damaging the structure of the soil. We will be using less combustible, less fuel. So we would be optimizing and using in a more rational way the treatments. I don't really have anything else to say. I just invite you to just address us your questions or doubts or commentaries, and I am here to help you out. Thank you so much. Thank you, Vicente. And thank you all following this 2-hour-long webinar. We are a bit out of time, so let's go into the round of questions. So I invite you all the participants to open your mics and cameras. So Paloma, if you can send us or transfer or translate the questions. And I only want to say that the recording of the presentations will be published in the InfoWine journal, so you will be able to see all of them later on and consult them in the journal. One question by different participants: when and where these models will be found? Maybe Deborah can answer that. Well, the models of viticulture will be at your disposal. I have uploaded a link in the chat, and you can then click on that and access a demo. These models do not take into account the spores aspect. That is a part of the project that is not included in any model yet. Any of you who want to test the model, you can ask for it using that link. We ask you, where are you working? We ask you your whereabouts because we will be using the nearest public station. In the case of Spain, we have several stations introduced, but in, let's say, Brazil, we don't really have public stations incorporated in the system, but we can provide you the most, a list of public stations so that you can use them as a test. Thank you, Deborah. Now, Amadine asks, what is the technology used for the count of spores? Javier, if you want to answer that. Yes, the methodology is the one used at the global level for any sort of microbiological counting in the atmosphere. There are many physics research and studies, and I have uploaded a link in the chat where you can find a book so that you can understand the methodology. It is in English. If you click on it, and you will be directed to the Spanish version also. Thank you, Javier. Then Marcel asks a very interesting question and wants to congratulate all the participants. He wants to know about the control of Plamospora. What is the importance of the application of fungicides in this case? Because we know that in springtime the vine grows very quickly, and the fungi are not transmitted to the tissues in development, in growth, in the growing stage. Carlos, maybe?
Thank you very much for your question. Very interesting. From April to June, the growth is really high, and therefore, depending, well, in the vineyard, I mean the plant growth, right? And depending on the climate conditions, the interval where you need to apply these products depend whether the climate or the phytosanitary product pressure. If you might need to apply it in every 7-8 days, or if the climate is not so dry, maybe you can apply every 2 weeks. We always use sprinklers, and we always use well, spray, and we use these products on the 2 sides of the leaves, the front and the back of the leaves, and it is important to have all the branches very well laid and of course trimmed appropriately, so that we can favor a more even distribution of the product. And also, interestingly enough, when we apply these products, fungicides, etc., and we think that there might be a mildew case or a plasmopara case, or because maybe we saw some symptoms, if we apply and then we see the new buds and they are healthy, it looks as if we are happier and we are relieved, because we have the sensation that we have fought the disease. This is in new buds. In old leaves, well, if you have symptoms, well, they are there. You might have these symptoms, or maybe you can stop the advance of the disease or the disease progress when these areas of the plant become dry. Thank you very much, Carlos. I don't know if anybody would like to give a different answer to this or complement this response. Yes, I would like to nuance this response, because in the Rías Baixas area, I think that we are the origin of mildew in Galicia. That is where we have more Plasmopara viticola or mildew in the whole of Galicia. I would like to say that obviously the systemic treatments at the beginning of the season allow for the spread of this product in the sap. And even though the growth it's really important, normally this is enough. And an important thing that we need to mention is that it is essential to perform revisions to the vineyard. And of course, the machinery to apply the treatment should be in the perfect state, so that we can check that the treatment has been efficient. We have been applying these techniques to optimize the treatments for many, many years. And except for several years where we had conditions extra favorable to or prone to mildew, except for these years, we are in this area that is Atlantic area, very prone to mildew. We can stay 1 month, even up to 1 month without applying any treatments, breathing quietly. So for Victor, what are the parameters that you use to measure the soil? Okay, I don't know which screen I'm using, but still doesn't matter. It's enough. We can hear you. Sorry, the question was, what are the parameters that you measure when you sample the soil? Well, our soil samples, we use them to evaluate, to assess the concentration, the presence or absence of phytosanitary products compared to the VITCAST plot or the conventional treatment plot, compared to the control row, which of course is not being treated. If you want to get to know the parameters, that is the phytosanitary products that we measure, well, I have all the reports, and therefore if you want to know such detail, I can provide you with all the details. Okay, if the participant is interested, he or she can write the question in the chat box, and we will send him or her the answer. What are the anti-oidio or anti-mildew treatments that you use, and what is the average per season? This is to Vicente. Okay, in our vineyard, we only can use products that are regulated by the council. And therefore, in our case, it is simple. We don't have a lot to use. I mean, we focus on sulfur when controlling oidium, and we apply every fortnight, every 15 days, normally. We alternate different concentrations of sulfur. We alternate liquid and powder applications. We focus more on the powder applications in the last phases, the moment there is more vegetation and it is more difficult to make liquid sulfur to penetrate well in the plant. And therefore, it is important to have good porosity, and therefore we need to have a good management of the vegetation so that these treatments can reach the innermost parts of the plant. Thank you, Vicente. The last question, because we are much beyond the allowed time. Have you experienced ozone applications? Have you used it? Have you studied it? No, not me. I know that there are people using it. Some neighbors of ours have been using it this year. What I can tell about their comments is that they need to treat weekly. In the end, apparently what they are doing is to clean the spores in case there are any spores. What I know is that you need to really be vigilant. In the case of Mata Romera, yes, we are using ozone in a project, but as Vicente is saying, it is a whole strategy. Ozone has a limited or restricted penetration capacity, and we are normally using it to treat wood disease or diseases in the wood of the vineyard. It is true that one of the handicaps by ozone is that the biocide capacity is really powerful, and after and treatment with ozone, you need to really care for the microbiota. We cannot just apply ozone and then forget about the soil, because at that moment there might be some microorganisms that might grow, these microorganisms that are really powerful when it comes to growing, and they can take advantage of the temporary situation. And therefore, as Vicente was mentioning, we need to go back to that periodically, ideally weekly. Yes. Thank you very much. We are going to just cut here, interrupt our session. We don't want to abuse you, I mean the speakers or the participants or the interpreters. And well, I would like to thank you for the great job that you have been doing, your great presentations, great contents, and I would like to thank the participants for their interest. Lucia, I'm going to give you the floor to officially close this event. Thank you very much to you all, to everybody. I hope that it has been fruitful and useful to all of you. And if at the end of the webinar, or maybe in the future, you might have some questions, some comments to share with us, you can, of course, use our webpage and write whatever you want there. Thank you very much to everybody. Bye-bye.